What would it take to make you rip your way out of your own tent, in the middle of a blizzard, in temperatures well below freezing, and run out into the wilderness with no shoes on? It's a terrifying question, because it implies a choice between two horrible options: staying inside, where there is some unknown, immediate threat, or fleeing into a frozen wasteland where a slow, agonizing death is almost certain. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This exact thing happened in 1959, deep in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, on a desolate, windswept slope that would later be named Dyatlov Pass. 9 experienced hikers went out for an expedition. They were more than prepared for, but they never returned. And the mystery of what happened to them on that final, terrifying night is arguably one of the most baffling and disturbing cold cases in modern history. The group was led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was an experienced outdoorsman, known for his meticulous planning and steady leadership. With him were 8 others, mostly students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They weren't amateurs. This was a seasoned crew. You had Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor who had to turn back early due to illness. There was Zinita Kolmogorova, a 22-year-old who was known for her strength and resilience on previous treks. Ludmila Dubinina, just 20 years old, was tough and had already survived a hunting accident where she accidentally shot herself in the leg. The group included Georgy Krivanashenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Rustem Slobodan, Alexander Kolevatov, and Nicholas Thibault-Brignolal. The oldest member was Semyon Zolotaryev, a 38-year-old instructor who had fought in World War II. They were all in their physical prime. They were well equipped with the best gear available at the time, and they had undertaken expeditions like this before. They knew the risks of the mountains, and they knew how to survive in them. There was absolutely nothing about this group that would suggest they were prone to panic or making reckless, fatal mistakes. They were the last people you would expect to find themselves in a situation they couldn't handle. But something out there, on that cold mountain, was far beyond anything their training could have ever prepared them for. Their journey began in late January 1959. They were aiming to reach a mountain called Otorten, a trek classified as a Category 3, the most difficult in the Soviet Union at that time. For the first week, everything went according to plan. The hikers kept a detailed journal and took photographs, and these records paint a picture of a challenging but cheerful expedition. They documented their progress, the landscape, and even moments of levity, like building a traditional wood-burning stove to keep warm. But as they pushed deeper into the wilderness, the weather began to turn. A powerful snowstorm descended, visibility dropped, and they began to deviate from their planned route. On February 1st, they found themselves on the slope of a different mountain. Kholat Syakhl, which translates from the local Mansi language as Dead Mountain. It's a name that would soon become tragically fitting. Instead of backtracking or seeking a more sheltered area, they made a decision that has puzzled experts ever since. They decided to set up camp right there, on the exposed, open slope. The temperature was plunging to around minus 30 degrees Celsius, with brutal, biting winds. Their last diary entry, made that day, gives no hint of fear or distress. It was just another night on the mountain. But it would be their last. Sometime in the dead of night, something happened inside that tent. Something so terrifying that it caused these 9 experienced hikers to take knives and slash their way out from the inside. They didn't even take the time to untie the entrance. They just ripped through the fabric and fled, pouring out into the pitch-black, freezing storm. Some of them were barefoot. Others had on only a single sock. Most were wearing little more than their sleeping clothes. They ran, in a desperate, panicked scramble, away from the relative safety of their shelter and down the treacherous, snow-covered slope. You can almost feel the icy wind on your skin, the crunch of snow under bare feet, the absolute, paralyzing confusion as they stumbled through the darkness. Whatever they were running from, it must have been more terrifying than freezing to death. Weeks went by with no word from the group. They were supposed to send a telegram by February 12th, and when it never arrived, their families grew worried. A search party was assembled, composed of volunteer students and teachers, and eventually the military. On February 26th, a rescue pilot spotted it from the air, their abandoned, partially collapsed tent on the side of Dead Mountain. When the search team reached it, the scene was deeply unsettling. The tent was half buried in snow and, as they would soon confirm, it had been cut open from the inside. All of the group's belongings, their clothes, their shoes, their food, their axes were still inside, neatly arranged. It was as if they had fled in an instant, leaving everything behind. A set of footprints led down the slope from the tent, but they were strange. The prints belonged to 8 or 9 people, and many of them were made by bare feet, socks, or a single boot. They weren't running in a chaotic scatter, but seemed to be walking in a relatively orderly line downhill, towards a patch of woods about a mile away. At the edge of the forest, beneath a large, old cedar tree, the searchers made their first grim discovery. They found the remains of a small fire and the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. They were both stripped down to their underwear and were barefoot. Their hands were scraped raw and branches on the cedar tree above them were broken up to a height of 15 feet, suggesting one of them had frantically tried to climb it, perhaps to get a better view or to escape something on the ground. A short distance away, between the cedar tree and the camp, 3 more bodies were found: Igor Dyatlov, Zineda Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They were found at different points along the line, back towards the tent, as if they had been trying to return. All 3 died of hypothermia. Rustem Slobodin also had a minor skull fracture, but it wasn't considered fatal. But even with these 5 discoveries, the mystery was far from solved. For hikers were still missing. It would take more than 2 months, after the snow began to melt, for the final, and most disturbing, discoveries to be made. In early May, the remaining 4 hikers were found buried under more than 10 feet of snow in a ravine, about 75 meters from the cedar tree. And it was their injuries that turned this tragic accident into an enduring and terrifying enigma. Ludmila Dubinina had massive, crushing chest fractures, with multiple ribs broken. Semyon Zolotaryev had similar, severe chest trauma. Nicholas the Bobrignolal had suffered a catastrophic skull fracture, and Alexander Kolovatov was found with them, seemingly having died of hypothermia. The coroner, who examined the bodies, was stunned. He stated that the force required to cause such injuries was equivalent to being hit by a speeding car. It was an extreme, powerful, concussive force. But here was the most baffling part. There were no corresponding external wounds, no significant cuts, no bruises, no soft tissue damage on their bodies that would explain how their insides had been so violently crushed. It was as if they had been squeezed by some incredible pressure. Furthermore, Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryev were found missing their eyes, and Ludmila was also missing her tongue. The official explanation was that this was the result of natural decay and scavenging by small animals in the wet environment of the ravine. But for many, this detail only added another layer of horror to the story. To make matters even stranger, some of the victims' clothing was found to contain low levels of radiation. Investigators ruled out every logical explanation. There were no signs of other people in the area, no footprints other than the hikers. There was no evidence of an animal attack. An initial theory was a simple avalanche, but the evidence didn't fit. The tent wasn't buried, and the damage to it wasn't consistent with a snowslide. The hikers' tracks leading away from the tent were also not indicative of people fleeing an avalanche. Other theories have emerged over the years, each trying to explain the unexplainable. One popular idea is infrasound low-frequency sound waves, generated by strange wind patterns around the mountain, which can induce feelings of intense panic, nausea, and dread in humans, causing them to flee irrationally. Another theory points to secret Soviet military weapons testing in the area, suggesting the hikers accidentally witnessed something they shouldn't have, and were either eliminated or became collateral damage from a parachute mine or some other concussive weapon. But no theory has ever been able to account for all the bizarre and contradictory pieces of evidence. For over 60 years, the story has remained suspended in that haunting space between fact and folklore. It's a perfect, awful puzzle with too many pieces that just don't fit. The official investigation in 1959 was closed abruptly, with the final report stating that the hikers died as a result of a compelling natural force they were unable to overcome. That vague and unsatisfying conclusion has only fueled the endless speculation. What compelling force could cause 9 experienced people to abandon their only shelter and run to their deaths? What could inflict injuries comparable to a car crash without leaving a single mark on the skin? We are left with only the chilling facts: the tent cut from the inside, the barefoot footprints in the snow, the desperate climb up a frozen tree, and the silent, inexplicable violence that crushed the life from them in the dark. 9 hikers set out on a routine expedition, and yet, what they encountered that night has baffled the world for over 60 years. That is going to do it for today, but if you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out and subscribe to our channel right here. We're going to be dropping stories every single day, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. I really appreciate you guys spending your time here with me today. Until next time, from Silent Secrets Stories, every secret has a story.